becoming well adjusted to injustice. That's called a hot moment.
The football combine testing is what NFL executives consider not a drug test, but an IQ test. That's what they do. They call it an IQ test. Ask any NFL executive, front office or otherwise, and they will say that if you fail a drug test, and you even for weed, which in 19 states is legal, you have failed the IQ test. You are, in fact, a dumbass. And that's my feeling about Sha'carri Richardson. No, I have no sympathy. I don't. Do I think it's dumb to still test for weed? I do. There has never been any sort of data that shows it is a performance enhancer, and it is no longer considered a drug of addiction. So there really isn't a viable medical or sports-based logic for why you should test for marijuana. That said, everybody, and I mean everybody, who competes for the Olympics knows what you can and cannot have in your system, especially sprinters. Every writer, every athlete that comes out and says all of the same thing, this is dumb, I'm with her, then you're with stupid. You should wear one of those shirts you can buy at Walmart, at Target, or wherever. I'm with stupid, because you are. And I'm not saying she's dumb in life. I'm saying in this particular case, it's a dumbass move, and everybody knows it.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Ideas for Prosperity. It's been a while. My initial launch was really a beta launch. I was getting used to how to use the equipment, learning how to use the editing software. It's all kinds of software, all kinds of equipment, all kinds of connections that you gotta learn. Also, how to learn about my style, what makes me comfortable, what's the format that I should be going for, what works best for me, what's the editing load of the video format that I envision, how to simplify these things to maximize on my time, since I do have a full-time job. I am not monetized. I am not fortunate enough to be doing this for a living as of yet. You know, this whole thing is getting off the ground. So rethought some things, learned a lot of things, and here's the new format. I hope you're enjoying it. So now let's go. That intro clip that you just saw, that was Doug Gottlieb. He is a host on Fox Sports, and he also hosts a radio show. I got the audio clip from his radio show specifically. So we're going to be talking about Sha'carri Richardson and my take on this entire story. What's it all about? For those of you who don't remember, who aren't aware, Sha'carri Richardson is the Olympic track star who received a suspension, a very light suspension, for testing positive for marijuana use shortly after her mother died. So according to Greg, Sha'carri is stupid, dumb, and is undeserving of sympathy. But then he goes, and it's so funny to hear this, because then he goes on to completely agree with me in a lot of other ways. He says that testing for weed is dumb, that there is no sports-based logic for marijuana testing, simply because it's not a performing-enhancing drug, which is one of the reasons the Olympic cites, one of three reasons the Olympic Committee cites to be able to levy this punishment against Sha'carri and any other Olympic athlete for that reason. And then he goes on to say, but everyone knows the rules and everyone knows that she is dumb. So let's break that down. So this man is actually, his instincts are halfway on the money here. He recognizes that testing for weed is dumb, that it's not a performance enhancing drug, and therefore there's zero sports-based logic for testing. What he does not do next is reconcile how come these three things can be true, but yet she's still subjected to these rules and therefore this punishment. That requires you to begin the process of funneling so that you can identify the root cause and that we can come up with a much more rounded assessment of what's going on with this story. Expand this conversation into some very necessary areas. So had he done that, for me, it takes me to the origin of marijuana prohibition. What is the origin of this prohibition? When did this whole thing begin? Because the next thing he does is, because he didn't do that process, because he didn't properly funnel, he just decides, well, everybody knows the rules. It doesn't matter why those rules exist. He recognizes that those rules are, in fact, unjust. At least unconsciously, he recognizes that these rules are unjust. But he is, as Cornel West likes to say, so well adjusted to injustice that Sha'carri Richardson should be completely dismissed by not also being properly well adjusted to this specific form of injustice. So when we funnel, we find out that this is about corporate power and control for the purposes of protecting their profits from the hemp industry. And they were able to do this through a propaganda campaign, which they were able to wage against us without our permission, in any way whatsoever. So we pick up with William Randolph Hearst, who is the father of modern day journalism. Now, William Randolph Hearst did not pull himself up from his bootstraps. His father, George Hearst, was a mining millionaire and a California state senator. George charted the San Francisco Examiner over to William in 1895. And in the same year, William actually went to New York and purchased the New York Journal because he envisioned being a media mogul. Thanks to the wealth that he was born into and the inheritance that he received. He could just do these things. So no working hard, no pulling himself up by his bootstraps, just privilege at work at the highest levels, which is something we've become accustomed to. He intentionally sensationalized the news as a business strategy. Now, he went to Harvard, and while at Harvard, he idolized Pulitzer's. Forgive me, I don't remember Pulitzer's first name, but Pulitzer and Hearst were contemporaries, and they actually went head to head for the nation's journalistic attention. And Hearst won because of his sensationalized the media tactics. He's actually known as the father of rumor-based journalism. So I want you to understand that the foundation of mainstream media in which you have become accustomed lays on top of rumor-based journalism. That is the foundation of modern day journalism, of mainstream journalism. Hearst would go on to own 6 papers, 31 magazines, and a newsreel company. But the thing is, he was heavily invested in timber. And timber's profits were under threat because of hemp. Hemp fiber could create almost indestructible clothing. It was just a superior product to timber. It took 6 months to grow versus the 3 years that it took timber to grow. You would think that a capitalist would say, let me sell as much of this timber as possible and then convert all those fields to hemp fields because it would make me more efficient. But instead, what they decided to do was eliminate the competition. So again, so much for capitalism creates competition, because from this perspective, what we can clearly see is that the richest, those who have risen to the top, then use that wealth, use that power, use that influence, use that prestige, and use that support to then stifle the competition behind them. It is akin to burning the fields. It's akin to burning the field, to locking the door behind you. To come up with a particular group of people. You're all working to be successful, right? And you're gonna, you know what I mean? And you respect each other's ability to work. But then when you get in the room, you never mention anyone else. You never look out for anyone. And in fact, you go out of your way to make sure that the door you walk through is now permanently closed for everyone else. That's what capitalists actually do. And that's what capitalism actually leads to. It leads to consolidation, and those who have consolidated a particular industry always go out of their way to stifle the competition. And this is just one example And there's actually multiple industries coming together, as you will see, to stifle this competition, because hemp is such a versatile product that it threatened multiple industries. Hemp is 12 times lighter than steel and 10 times as strong. Think about that. All these steel buildings that went up in the air would be both lighter and stronger had we made them from hemp. Skin creams and lotions. So we're talking about the construction industry. We're talking about automobile manufacturing. When they made an automobile out of mostly hemp fiber, the automobile was 12 times lighter than steel and 10 times stronger than it typically would be. It actually made fuel for vehicles. So we're talking about the gas industry. The fossil fuel industry is under threat. And if it could make, fuel, we could use this for heating homes as well. So multiple industries under threat by this very versatile product, which would not have wreaked as much havoc on the environment had we gone this route. So because of corporate power, control, influence, and propaganda, we're now left with a world that is that much more devastated by capitalism than it would have been. And it also could be used to make alcoholic beverages. So multiple industries. And this is why William Randolph Hearst was aided by people such as Rockefeller and DuPont, right? DuPont, their profits in both nylon, polyester, and synthetic plastics were under threat from the hemp industry. So they participated in what was not just national, but a global effort to make marijuana illegal for the purposes of protecting their profits from the potential hemp industry. Rockefeller was actually the leading developer in the pharmaceutical industry, and he saw medical herbs and marijuana as the biggest threat, hemp as the biggest threat to his industry. He saw it as competition, which he himself is quoted as saying, "Competition is a sin." Again, these talking points of capitalism is the best vehicle for competition. One day we're going to go over a book such as Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky, which really goes over how those are talking points that were delivered to us by these same people through various propaganda campaigns over time. We can't get into that in this video now because that's not what that's about. We just have to touch on that subject while forming our view here, while rounding out our view. So hemp was actually the most commonly used medicine in the world at the time. So Rockefeller took the most commonly used and most accessible medical treatment that the people of the world had at their fingertips, took it away from us for the purposes of his own profits. I want you to understand that. For the purposes of his own profits. The Declaration of Independence was written on hemp paper. Hemp paper is stronger, much more viable. Like I said, much more renewable, has less impact on the environment. But as far as the government is concerned, we had Harry Anslinger, who was the chief of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. Anslinger was a leftover, a relic from the failed prohibition of alcohol. And the writing was on the wall that prohibition of alcohol was out. So Anslinger wanted to work with William Randolph Hearst, DuPont, and others, Rockefeller and others, because it was beneficial for him to do so, as he said, at a crusade against the popular drug and a subsequent support that a vicious propaganda campaign would garner would equal for himself never-ending funding for his department. So that was his purposes. He had 30 doctors that he commissioned to draw up a link between violent crime and marijuana. 29 of them said no such link existed, which was something Harry Anslinger believed himself while he was working on alcohol prohibition before he became the bureau chief of the Bureau of Narcotics. He actually said at that time the idea that marijuana caused violent behavior to be an absurd fallacy. Those are his exact words. So 29 of the 30 doctors said there's no link to violent crime. The one doctor that said there was, he used William Randolph Hearst media apparatus to put that doctor's perspective view out there and to then say that to disagree with that doctor's view, he didn't even talk about the other 39. The public didn't even know that there were 29 other doctors that disagreed. He said to disagree with this one doctor was a national security risk. Einziger used racism, sexism, xenophobia. He used all kinds of tactics to get the support he needed to outlaw hemp. That was the purpose, hemp, which was known, but the smokable version of it was known as cannabis. He decided to start calling these things marijuana. They even misspelled it. And to this day, if you try and spell marijuana correctly, spell check will tell you, no, we have to misspell it the way Harry Anslinger and William Randolph Hearst did. He wanted to associate the drug with Mexicans and fearmonger about Mexicans crossing the southern border. Textbook. Where have we seen this before? Textbook. He said reefer makes darkies think they are as good as white men. And darkies. Okay. Most marijuana users are Negroes, Hispanics, pedophiles, and entertainers. He mentioned entertainers because jazz was much more heavily persecuted than rap music ever was. Jazz was considered a public health emergency back then. Satanic music that gives black musicians superpowers. Anslinger harassed Billie Holiday for years and so intensely that when she was on her deathbed, dying from both heart failure and kidney failure, Anslinger had her arrested and she died handcuffed to a hospital bed with federal guards outside of her door. But, and this was common. He went after both sellers and users of drugs viciously, except when it came to the case of Judy Garland's heroin addiction, in which Anslinger himself considered that not to be a problem. In regards to a very wealthy Washington socialite who was arrested using marijuana, he said it would destroy the unblemished reputation of one of the nation's most honored families. Again, it would destroy the unblemished reputation of one of the nation's most honored families. So if you are rich and famous, he doesn't care. If you are just rich, a wealthy socialite born into money, definitely doesn't care. In fact, you have honor and your reputation is unblemished. In reality, it's unblemished because you have enough wealth to never suffer any consequences. And as far as the global implications on this, because this is all taking place here in the United States of America, Anslinger continued to grow his media empire, to spread it all over the world. And he also had influence within the United Nations. And these corporations, of course, do not have boundaries. They are beholden to no nation. So this propaganda effort was a global effort by multiple industries. And this is what we must understand. But we already knew. At the time, what did we know? Specifically, at the time, what did the government already know about marijuana, regardless of this propaganda campaign? Because this goes to show how powerful propaganda really can be. It can override factual information. And what good were these two things? The Indian Hemp Drug Commission's report and the Panama Canal Zone military investigation into marijuana by the United States military itself. Both of these studied the effects on users, and both reports advised against prohibition or restricting public access in any manner. So this was buried because when you have a privatized media, that's the media apparatus you have. And the only way in which the Constitution could manifest and which could be manifested our right to a free press, right? What's the purpose of that right? We want a free press because propaganda isn't new. People have been facing propaganda wars since people have been organized. So having a free press, it essentially turns the journalists into our frontline soldiers on an information war so that we can get quality, adequate, and therefore quality information so that we as voters as members of the electorate, as co-kings and queens of this democracy, can be informed well enough to make the appropriate decisions in the ballot box. That is the purpose and the overall function of this particular constitutional amendment, the right to a free press. But as we can see, the only person that really gets to express their freedom in this situation is William Randolph Hearst. He is free to use the press for his own purposes, to protect his own investments in the timber industry, which were under threat by hemp, and then to work with his fellow oligarchs. That includes the Rockefellers. Fellow companies, large corporations, that include companies like DuPont, using his position and his influence within the global political sphere, as well as the domestic political sphere. The United Nations over there, and the bureau chief for the Bureau of Narcotics. William Randolph Hearst is the one who had freedom here. We were just bamboozled. So in this case, and I want you to think about in how many cases does the constitutional right to a free press manifest itself as more freedom for the oligarchs, more beneficial for the oligarchs than actually is for us. I'm not speaking against the Constitution. I'm speaking against its exploitation. And I'm speaking on the fact that the state of journalism in the United States rests upon the propaganda tactics and the sensationalized media system that was created by William Randolph Hearst. So our journalists, but this is able to happen because our journalists are serving their own ambition by lining up behind these corporations instead of saying no and serving us as our frontline soldiers in an expected information war. So we want to talk about this on a small scale. We can talk about Sha'carri Richards being irresponsible, but when we do the process of funneling, it leads us to where most news stories lead us to, which is corporate corruption, scandal, collusion, propaganda. That's what it leads to almost every time. So I think people such as Doug Gottlieb are just examples of what Cornel West says all the time. People that have become well adjusted to injustice. And the real crime, real reason that Sha'carri Richardson doesn't deserve any sympathy is because she was not well adjusted enough to this injustice, which is equal, in my view, to corporate oppression. That's all it is corporate oppression. Their ability to oppress us because of what is best for their profits. But I thought America was about increasing the quality of life, first and foremost, for the citizens of America. But when you break down cases like this, it just looks like we're arguing at ourselves. And really we're policing ourselves, much like slaves, much like a house slave would do a field slave to maintain your little bit of benefits because you're well adjusted to the oppression. You say, yes, you can violate me. Yes, I will follow arbitrary rules only because those rules are more convenient to corporate profits. Yes, I will reduce my life, my freedom, and what I have access to protect myself from the tyranny that would be wreaked upon me should I step out of line. So I'm not going to talk bad about Sha'carri Richardson because she got caught up in a game of corporate oppression going back about 100 years. I would say over 100 years because William Randolph Hearst began to sensationalize the media immediately back in 1895 when he inherited the San Francisco Examiner and then purchased the New York Journal. So that's how I want to think about things. I want to expand upon the conversation, identify the root cause, and I want to let that be my focus so that we can really begin to connect and see that we have much more in common. So tell me what you think in the comment section. Please like, share, and subscribe. I could really appreciate it. I will be putting out more videos consistently going forward. Tell me what you think about the new format. I'm really excited to hear feedback from you guys. Tell me if you like my process of funneling and trying to expand the conversation and really dwell in that space of macro rather than micro. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I appreciate it.
And trying to reshape the whole globe in its image and for its interest, primarily corporate interest.